the first one is called the snow globe effect, right? If you imagine a snow globe and your brain is a snow globe and the snow is all kind of settled and the snowflakes are all kind of settled, what psychedelics do is they shake up the snow globe so that the snow has a chance to fall in a different place or to fall in a different way.
Howdy, everyone. It's your host, Polly Siegel. And for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, certified addiction specialist, and master level trained mindfulness practitioner. I own a counseling practice in both Colorado and Illinois, and I specialize in trauma, OCD, and anxiety. If you live in either of those two states, feel free to reach out to me for a consultation and we can begin the therapeutic journey together. Now on to the good shit. Welcome to season 3 of Shit Talkin' Shrinks. Gosh, I'm so excited. I will be featuring experts in the healing space, and we're discussing a variety of mental health topics, the human experience, and society at large, while creating levity along the way. Get ready to laugh, learn a lot, and change your life for good. Hello, everyone, for another fabulous episode of Shit Talking Shrinks. The topic today, I have been counting down the nanoseconds to discuss, truly. I swear, some topics, I'm jazzed about, some topics I'm kind of like, all right, let's do this. But this one is so important to me because of my own journey that I'm starting to embark on. But to not tease anyone further, I have my guest, Lana Pribic. You're a certified professional life coach, and you really work with people who want to better their lives by deeply integrating insights from their psychedelic experiences. And you're also the podcast or host of Modern Psychedelics, which is how I discovered you. So I think it's important before we jump into it is to really acknowledge some of the skepticism that people have around plant medicine and psychedelics as part of a healing journey. And my hunch is that part of it is because it's still illegal. These are still, Schedule II drugs, and humans are really scared of things that are criminal, right? There's the psychology of that. What are your thoughts on that being part of the skepticism?
Yes, I love that we're starting here because it is so relevant. And also, thank you so much for having me on your show. And thank you for your enthusiasm about psychedelics and inviting my world into yours today. So yeah, with the skepticism, it really is such a cultural thing, I think. There's a few ways that we can look at this to understand the skepticism. The first being the drug war that took place in I don't know if it was as early as the 60s, but 70s, 80s, into the 90s. The war on drugs that started in the United States caused a domino effect in most Western countries when, the Nixon administration decided that psychedelics were bad and that they would melt your brain and all of those things. It was not because that was actually true. It was because of cultural and societal reasons. There is a book, which I'm forgetting the name of, but I can send it to you after, and maybe you can link it in the show notes. But there is a book about the drug war that goes over how a lot of that was actually massively racist and meant to target underprivileged minority groups based on race in the United States. And that's not just true of psychedelics. It's true of, crack cocaine,
cannabis.
Exactly. It was targeting people of color and wanting to put them behind bars. There was actually a lot of research worldwide on psychedelics in the 30s, 40s, and 50s before the drug war era started and basically shut down psychedelic research overnight. And some of the research that was going on with mescaline, LSD, ketamine, a little bit on DMT, it was profound, and there was an amazing momentum around this tightly knit group of psychotherapists, clinicians, psychopharmacologists that were studying these drugs. And they were initially interested in whether or not they mimicked the symptoms of schizophrenia. And that was kind of what they first started researching. And then as time went on, they found that they were incredibly powerful for treating depression, for getting people to stop being addicted to cigarettes and alcohol, and that it was discovered that there was great therapeutic value in psychedelic drugs. So that was kind of the first wave of modern psychedelic research. It was completely shut down. And it was not because these were meant to be Schedule 1 and 2 substances that have no medical value. That is just not true. Second of all, another way to look at the skepticism is just through the cultural lens that we have in North America. We are a society and a culture that is very much in the head and wants the facts and wants the science and wants the proof, but we want it in the way that we want it. However, if we look at the Amazon, there are many, many cultures, communities, and groups of people that work with ayahuasca as an example, combo as another example, which isn't a psychedelic, but these medicines are part of their cultural vocabulary, their cultural medicine cabinet, really. And they use these medicines for a wide variety of both psychological and physical ailments. If you look at Africa, in Gabon, there is an ancient culture called Bwiti, and they have been using the iboga medicine, which is one of the most powerful psychedelics known to man, since, some of them say that iboga or Bwiti began when the earth began, that it's that ancient. So the skepticism really, to me, comes from this cultural perspective, this cultural lens that we have of what medicine means, of what effectiveness means, and what healing or wellness or the pursuit of wellness is supposed to look like. And these indigenous elders in various parts of the world have so much to teach the West about, wellness and betterment and self-actualization.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you're saying. And it also makes me sad how limited we are in our thinking when it comes to westernized culture. Even when I think about, Eastern medicine and how profound that has been, and that could be included in, plant medicine, but also not just herbs and different things that come from the earth, how profound that is for our physical health. Yet everyone thinks it's bullshit, because you wouldn't go to your doctor and your pediatrician or your, primary care physician. They wouldn't recommend Chinese medicine, although it's been used for centuries and has been life-changing. It's just so interesting to me how Americans, I'll just say Americans because that's where I am, but also, you live in Canada, and Canadians probably have a very similar disposition, and Australians and any westernized culture, where it's like, we're so confined in our thinking.
Yeah, because what kind of limits does that create for the way that we live our lives, right? And these are the kinds of questions that I love to explore as a coach and as a psychonaut. But yeah, like, how do the systems that we operate in and the ways of thinking, the patterns of thinking that we operate within actually shape our lives and our experience of life? And that's precisely why I have fallen so in love with psychedelics, because so psychedelic means mind manifesting. The word was discovered by Humphrey Osmond and Aldous, what's his name? And Huxley. Aldous Huxley. Yes, Aldous Huxley. And they were writing back and forth, and the word psychedelic came up through this poem. And that poem was, "To fathom hell or soar angelic, just take a pinch of psychedelic." And that's because we can't really predict where the psychedelic will take us, the journey that it will take us on. And that is the nature of psychedelic work. And just by deciding to engage in that, one does need to be open in ways to that experience. And of course, if you're not, that can lead to, quite a challenging period of integration along with a challenging experience. But yeah, that really is why I love psychedelics so much, because they literally open up our minds, which I think is something that Western civilization really could benefit from.
Absolutely. So I want to get into maybe more of like terms and creating a really accurate picture. Tell us about the psychedelic drug class. Like, what is it? What drugs fall into this particular drug class? How do they work in the brain?
There are 4 classic psychedelics. So there is DMT. Now, this is a naturally occurring molecule in the human brain. And DMT is either, consumed on its own, and that has a very, very quick onset, like within a couple heartbeats, it hits you and it's very intense, or it can be consumed in the ayahuasca or yahe brews in the Amazon. And that is actually from DMT that is found in leaves, which is combined with an MAO inhibitor, which makes it so that the DMT lasts longer. It's a longer journey. So DMT is that first one. The second one is psilocybin, of course, found in psilocybin containing mushrooms. This is a longer journey, about 6 hours or so. And there are hundreds of species of psilocybin containing mushrooms globally that vary in their intensity of the psychedelic effects. So with psilocybin mushrooms, it's very common to have open-eyed, closed-eyed visuals. It's very like classically psychedelic, let's say. The third one would be LSD, acid. This was synthesized by Albert Hofmann in the 20s, I think, or the 30s. He was actually looking for a cure for female postpartum pain. And he synthesized LSD from ergot, which is a fungus. So a lot of people don't know that LSD is actually naturally derived.
Hey, I thought it was man-made.
Well, it is, but it was discovered through the ergot fungus. It was, I guess, isolated would be the term from the ergot fungus. LSD lasts about, 10 hours. So this is the one that I feel like people probably report the most quote unquote bad trips, just because it can be so long. We can talk about mindset and setting and dose and all of that if you want, which are like really important for determining the way a journey unfolds. But yeah, LSD is like very psychedelic as well. Like mushrooms, there's visuals, felt bodily sensations. And like I said, it's about 10 hours.
Wow.
And then the fourth one is mescaline, which is a molecule that is found in like huachuma or peyote cactus. This is the one I haven't experienced myself, so I can't actually speak on it, but it is like the way of beauty, right? It teaches through beauty. It's very euphoric and beautiful, and often traditionally consumed in like the mountains in the Andes. And then I also want to honorably mention iboga. It's not a classic psychedelic, but it is one of the most powerful ones. It is a tree that grows in Africa, and it is actually extremely effective for curing addiction to substances like opiates. And it's not traditionally used for that, but they have found that the use of ibogaine, which is one of the main alkaloids in iboga, is very effective for what's that term? When they're taking someone through withdrawal symptoms, exactly, through detox and withdrawal, and then also creating a psychological and emotional reset for a person to really do the healing work that is needed to beat addiction. So yeah. And then there's some other ones. There's like MDMA, which is not a classic psychedelic. It's more of an amphetamine. There's ketamine, which is a dissociative, but it can have psychedelic effects at certain doses. 2CB, but I don't know how far down the rabbit hole we want to go.
Well, actually, you read my mind because I was about to say, I've always understood as ketamine as part of the psychedelic realm, but it's almost like an adjacent. Maybe it's not the classic psychedelic.
It's like a psychedelic adjacent molecule. They are applying psychedelic assisted psychotherapy protocols to work with ketamine. And I actually interviewed a ketamine researcher and clinician on my podcast, and he was very adamant that at certain doses, ketamine acts as a psychedelic.
I want to take a quick pause to talk about our sponsor, a company called BetterHelp. It's an online therapy platform where all the therapists are licensed and accredited professionals. It's affordable. You pay a low flat fee for therapy with your therapist, and it's convenient. Do it at your own time and at your own pace, and you can communicate with your therapist as much as you want and whenever you feel is needed. And more importantly, it's effective. Thousands of people have benefited from therapy using BetterHelp, and we're really grateful to offer all of our listeners 10% off your first month. So if you're interested in receiving therapy ASAP, click the link in our show notes and you can get started. And you get to save money. Now my curiosity is, what is it about psychedelics that help the brain have this eye-opening experience where these new neural pathways are being created? The brain is having this jump start to be able to heal and transform. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what is it about these drugs that allow for that?
Yeah, so people often talk about how psychedelics enhance neuroplasticity in the brain. And of course, neuroplasticity is our ability to change our brain, to rewire the pathways that we have formed over lifetimes in the brain. There are some metaphors that speak to this phenomenon, and I'll revert to the metaphors because I'm not a scientist and I'm not great at speaking about science. But it's kind of like the first one is called the snow globe effect, right? If you imagine a snow globe and your brain is a snow globe, and the snow is all kind of settled and the snowflakes are all kind of settled. What psychedelics do is they shake up the snow globe so that the snow has a chance to fall in a different place or to fall in a different way.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, you haven't heard that one before. Okay, great.
I haven't. Wow. I don't know why I'm having such an emotional response, but just as you said that, like, as they fall in a new spot, that like gave me shivers.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the world of psychedelics. It's pretty amazing over here. And then the other one you might also really like, Michael Pollan wrote about this one in his book, How to Change Your Mind, which does cover a lot of the science, even though there are some people who don't really love that book. But I digress. Imagine this field, right? Not this field. Imagine this mountain that is covered in snow, or this hill that is covered in snow with this freshly fallen snow, right? And it's like every time you think a thought or you associate a thought with a pattern of behavior, right? Imagine that as a sled going down that hill, and it creates this path. The more times that we have that thought or that we repeat that behavior, the more firmly carved that path is, right? The more ingrained that path is, the more often we choose to take that path because it's easy. It's there. It's the one that's already been paved, right? That's kind of how neural pathways work in our brain. They say that what psychedelics do is that they offer that fresh snowfall. They help us cover the tracks that we have already created in the brain, and they may help us to have that like fresh start, that blank slate to create new neural pathways. Now, people also speak about the default mode network, and that is kind of the part of our brain that is active when basically we're not present. So it's the part of the brain that is active when we're ruminating, when we're thinking about the past or we're worrying about the future, when we're just not fully present, when we're not engaged with what we're doing, which of course serves such a powerful function, right? Otherwise we wouldn't have, like, we all need to plan. We all need to think about the future. We all need to like remember what happened in the past when we're like doing our taxes and stuff, right? We need that. But when it comes to these psychological conditions like anxiety and depression, that's the case where that part of the brain isn't so useful and it kind of keeps us stuck in the past or stuck in the future. So it's been researched and shown that psychedelics turn off the default mode network. So again, I'm not a scientist. I don't know what conclusions the scientists are drawing from that. But the way that I interpret that is that under the influence of psychedelics, you are fully present and you're fully present to what you're experiencing. And a lot of times people in psychedelic experiences are experiencing intense emotions, whether that's grief or sadness or joy or bliss, but whatever is occurring, they're fully there. And I believe that that is what makes psychedelics so healing. I believe that a lot of us don't know how to feel. A lot of us suppress our feelings. A lot of us are taught to, put things away or not express. And we build up these defense mechanisms. But in a psychedelic experience, it's pretty hard to avoid what you're feeling. And in that experience, you're actually granted, with good facilitation, hopefully, an opportunity to really safely and with like tenderness look at whatever maybe you haven't processed and to finally release it.
Right. Yeah, and I had this visual that was coming to mind as you were just talking, that we naturally, evolutionarily as humans will do everything we can to avoid. That is instinctual because our brain's sole purpose is to keep us safe and alive. And when we're feeling intense emotions, the brain views that as potential vulnerability, right? So that's why we have so many strategies to get rid of, to numb, to distract. And so you can, brush it under the rug, but I feel like psychedelics is like, no, no, no. Like you got to lift the rug and kind of see what's been under there. And you're faced in a way where you can start to heal, because avoidance doesn't heal. It just masks.
Yeah, one of the podcast guests that I had on my show early on said something I'll never forget. He said, you can't let go of what you don't first hold. Kind of similar to like, you have to feel it to heal it. But yeah, how can you let go of something if you aren't first willing to hold it and to look at it and to understand it?
And, I don't want to make it seem like psychedelics forces that process, but in some way it brings it to the forefront where you have the opportunity to hold it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're given a chance to hold it.
Yeah. And then maybe this is a good time to talk about everything else that goes into a psychedelic experience, because what's so fascinating and mysterious about psychedelics to me is that it doesn't seem like the drug in itself is the thing. So, and this is really important for newcomers to psychedelics to understand. So with pharmaceuticals, right, we're used to this like, okay, I have a symptom and I have this pill, and that pill is, I'm going to take that pill and it's going to get rid of the symptom, right? That's not how psychedelics work. It's not like, okay, I'm going to eat these mushrooms and they're going to cure my depression. What is really important with psychedelics, more so than the substance itself, is setting, dosage, your guides, your environment, your intentions, how you integrate the experience. Like there's so much that goes into this work. And that's why as a society or as a medical community, they're kind of stunned and confused about how to actually implement these psychedelics into our modern medical system, because they're just so different than any other type of treatment option. So there's so much to consider with psychedelics.
A lot of people are now, the buzz is microdosing versus, a full-on dose that creates a very different internal experience. Can you just walk us through what is the difference between microdosing and a more therapeutic dose?
Yeah, so there's a big difference. Microdosing is not necessarily, actually, let me phrase that in a stronger way. Microdosing is not a psychedelic experience. Microdosing is the use of psychedelics, but it is not a psychedelic experience. So, microdosing is taking 1/10 to 1/20th of a regular dose, right? Of a therapeutic dose. And this can be like a really nice gentle entry into the world of psychedelics. It's like my mom is 64 and she microdoses mushrooms. And it can be a really gentle approach. It's kind of very useful actually in the integration process of a bigger journey. That's how I prefer to microdose. It's kind of that like day-to-day support, right? It's that thing you do day to day that I always explain as it kind of reduces the friction. It helps cultivate some presence. It helps kind of calm the mind. It helps with like day-to-day living, right? It's like yeah, I know like Paul Austin talks about it as like it's the flossing your teeth, right? Whereas like a big journey is like going to the dentist for a cleaning, right? So a big journey, there's much more involved in that. And like there's likely not going to be an aftershock or an after effect of microdosing as much as there will be with a full dose. So, yeah, those are some of the differences. Anything else that I can kind of go in there for you?
Well, I want to go back to the snow globe because I was so moved by it. Would you say microdosing is shaking it a little bit? Like some of the snow starts to kind of go up and down, but nothing in a radical way.
We can maybe think of it as shaking the snow globe, but very slowly, so that over a long period of time, you might get one good shake, if that makes sense, right? Much slower. Or alternatively, we can maybe think of it as something, because I do love microdosing for integration. I find it can be very helpful in like actually changing the habits and doing the things you want to do to create change in your life after a psychedelic experience. It could possibly be like the helper that helps decide where the snow will fall after it has been shaken.
No, I think that's a visual for all the listeners that it's doing what it's intended to do, which is create new neural pathways or allow the brain new ways of thinking, doing, feeling, experiencing, but not in a dramatic way. Whereas the therapeutic dose is the dramatic way, right?
The microdosing may even be the thing that helps the new arrangement of the snowflakes stay there and get used to being there.
Yeah. And so on the other side of the pendulum, a therapeutic dose, that's just greater quantity.
Yeah. Yeah. So with mushrooms, I think like a full dose is considered 2.5 grams. And then one up from that would be like the hero's dose, which I hate the name of. I think they say that that's 5 grams. I've never personally done more than 4 grams of mushrooms. But yeah, it's also different. Like with Iboga, for instance, I have no idea how they do the dosing. You have to be very trained to be an Iboga provider and know how they do their dosing. LSD, it's measured in micrograms, which 125 micrograms is a tab or a full dose of that. So to microdose LSD, you would kind of take like maybe 10 micrograms or so as a microdose. So it's like 1/10 to 1/20th of a regular dose.
So if I'm doing this, by the way, worst person at math. Okay, so you might laugh, but here's my attempt. So if you were doing the microdosing of mushrooms, would that be anywhere between like 50 to 100 milligrams?
Yeah. Yeah. And people can even go up to 150, 200 milligrams with mushrooms. But I personally find that to be too much for me. I think my sweet spot's around 120 milligrams. But it's always good to start. We always say in the psychedelic space, start low and slow, low and slow. There's no rush. Trust me, you don't want to rush.
It brings me back to being 15 years old when my boyfriend at the time was like, hey, take an eighth of mushrooms. And I did. And it was fucking terrible.
Yeah.
But again, I was 15 years old, right? Like my brain was not ready for an eighth of mushrooms at the time.
Yeah. And a lot of people who have those bad trips, it's exactly like that. Yeah. You're like 15, 16 at a party. Like you have no idea what you're about to go into. Like you're totally not mentally prepared. You're not in the most supportive setting to feel safe to actually experience this the effects of what come up. And so you build a lot of resistance to it, and that can be enough to create the ingredients for a very challenging trip and can turn many people off of psychedelics for many years.
Oh, and I would say that's my story, is I can't forget that 15-year-old's experience. And that's why, you know, when I started the episode, I said a journey that I'm starting to embark on of like, how do I really remind myself that that experience isn't what it's always going to be like, and that there's so much benefit and so much amazingness that will come, you know, if I do it in an appropriate way, with the right dosage, in the right setting, with the right intention, with the right support. Like that, I want to hit home for listeners that if you if you did have a bad trip, that doesn't mean it's off the table forever. I think it's just about tweaking it and doing it correctly. So I want to segue into tangible tools. If listeners are interested in beginning, whether it's microdosing or a therapeutic dose, what do you advise? Because there's all these different options, and I think it can be a little daunting.
Yeah, I think it really starts with education and learning. There's many fantastic books out there there's many fantastic books out there about psychedelics. You would actually be shocked at how much literature exists that is both old school and modern. Of course, podcasts, the Modern Psychedelics Podcast is a great place to learn. I think it's great to hear people's trip reports and experiences in the beginning. However, once people decide like, okay, I'm going to have my ayahuasca experience, or okay, I'm going to go have my iboga experience. At that point, stop consuming trip reports, stop listening to other people, because it's like, it's good to listen to it to the point where it gets you interested and helps you make the decision that you want to have the experience for yourself. But then if we continue to listen to other people's stories and other people's trip reports, what can happen is that we actually start forming expectations around what will happen for us. And with psychedelics, like truly every single journey is so different. That's the magic of psychedelics. That's why it's like, how do we actually like medicalize and standardize these things that are so mysterious and unpredictable? I don't know. I actually don't know if they should be medicalized and industrialized. Like I'm pretty, yeah, I think that there's a lot to think about if we go down that route as a society. But yeah, truly, like everyone's experience is so different. And even like within the experience, we can start to have expectations about how things will happen. So I think like working on opening yourself up to whatever happens is huge in the early stages, to really be mindful of your expectations going in. One thing I always like to ask people, like if I'm working with someone in a coaching container and they're thinking of having a journey, like how willing would you be to go on this journey to take the psychedelic if you don't get exactly what you want, right? And that's always like a really good gauge of how open someone is to whatever happens. And yeah, I think like educating oneself on the different containers that are available. You know, I started my journey with psychedelics 13 years ago as a little 20-year-old raver. And I took MDMA for the first time, and then went to music festivals and did acid and mushrooms. And then that like slowly evolved into ceremonial, therapeutic healing containers and ayahuasca ceremonies and iboga. And I just went to do 5-MeO DMT, which was very holy. But yeah, there's many different containers. There's like rave culture and using these medicines recreationally. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that if you are doing it in an informed way. And if you are very careful with your dosing and your substances and you're informed and you're testing and, all of that, all the power to the underground rave scene. I am here for it. That's why mainstream society knows about psychedelics in at least in terms of like the synthetics like ketamine and MDMA. But there's, ceremonial indigenous experiences. You can go to, Peru or Colombia or Ecuador and experience ayahuasca with a direct lineage who has been holding the medicine for, thousands of years in their family name. I had an experience like that with Shipibo Maestras, and it was, wow, so incredibly special to partake in their culture, right? But that's a very different paradigm than what we're used to. There's, of course, the clinical medical setting. Some people are not comfortable doing this kind of thing unless they're under medical supervision. There's clinical trials. There's, ketamine clinical therapy that you can go. There's psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So there's so many options. And I think it's really important to choose the one that you feel called to and that you feel safe with. Lastly, I would really encourage people to treat this as their own journey and to really lean into their gut instinct. Like, this is something that you will know best around. And even though you can do all your research and hear all the stories and gather all the information that you need, at the end of the day, it really comes down to where are you feeling pulled? What is your energy being called to? What medicine? What kind of space? Because I believe there's a reason for that. And when we are kind of like energetically engaged and pulled to a certain thing, that does impact the outcome that comes from that. So I think that psychedelics provide a beautiful opportunity of self-discovery, of healing, of growth, of learning about oneself, of learning about nature and the nature of reality. And it really is such an individual journey, even though we all benefit from having lots of help and support around us. It really is a coming home to oneself and a discovery of our own inner landscapes.
As we wrap up this incredible episode, I want to also encourage people to use it as, a supplemental experience to what they're doing in therapy. Like we have the traditional route of outpatient therapy where you go in and you sit on the couch. Just kidding. You're just sitting, in your chair across the screen for most people doing virtual care here. And you're talking about your feelings and you're processing things, and that has limitations to it. And I think really viewing it as I can still do that, and is there an opportunity to explore plant medicine, not in maybe a dramatic way, as you said, you can start small and maybe microdosing is the introduction, or maybe it's going to a rave and having some fun, but like thinking of it as this can be supplemental in my healing. This can be an add-on to my healing. This can be a conjunction to maybe more, quote, traditional ways of healing. And that there's a whole world to explore. And so I, as a clinician, would offer that and say, check it out, educate yourself. And also, like you said, working with a coach or working with someone who has this specialty so that you can be guided and you can be held in a way that allows for a more impactful experience. So those are sort of my wrap up thoughts. Anything else before you and I sign off?
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. There's so much information out there for people to explore. And yeah, I'm all in with the psychedelic space. I'm all in with the movement. So yeah, if people want to know more, they can explore. Yeah, my podcast, there's so much on there. But I think what I want to leave people with is like my hope for humanity is that as we all kind of like do our own work and our own healing and our own transformation, that work weaves with all of humanity and community and everyone around us so that we can just leave this world a better place. And that's like a very, very common, I guess, sentiment of people who use psychedelics, because they do offer us this opportunity to tap into the interconnectedness between ourselves, our fellow humans, nature, and the earth. And yeah, I think that we can't really tap into that if we feel like we're broken. So, like, our individual healing is important for ourselves, and then also so that we can break through that and, yeah, just make this world a better place for everyone.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Lana, so much for joining me, and for all of Shit Talking Shrink listeners. You've got a lot to chew on and a lot to process after listening to this episode. And everything in terms of resources will be in the show notes. I highly recommend listening to Lana's podcast. That is actually how I got in touch with her. And we're wishing everyone, I don't know, be trippy, trip balls.
Be groovy, baby.
Be groovy, baby. And on that note, catch everyone later.